Yeah, so whenever you talk about the origins of the biblical canon, one of the things that comes up is, well, why is it that it seems like Roman Catholics have a slightly different canon than Protestants? And you'll notice that if you read a Catholic Bible, that in the Old Testament, there's more books than in the Protestant Old Testament. And this additional collection of books has a name. It's called the Apocrypha. And the Apocrypha is just a word that means hidden books, but it's a reference to this collection of books that was added later by the Roman Catholic Church at the Council of Trent in the 16th century. Some of those books are ones you may have heard of, books like 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Judith, Tobit, and beyond. Now, these collection of books, the Roman Catholic Church added at a later point. And one of the questions that comes up is, well, why don't Protestants have those in our Bibles? And what should we think about those particular books? Well, there's a reason why Protestants don't have those books in our Bibles, and let me explain why. The core reason that we don't have those books in our Bibles is because those books were not the books that were in the Bible received by Jesus and the apostles. In the first century when Jesus lived, and in the first century when the apostles lived, Israel at that time, the Jews at that time, had an Old Testament canon. And from all we can tell, that Old Testament canon did not include these books that are called the Apocrypha. How do we know they did not include the books that we call the Apocrypha? Well, one way we can know is just by how much the New Testament writers, many of which were apostles, and even on the lips of Jesus himself, cited the Old Testament books. We have thousands and thousands of allusions or references to the Old Testament in our New Testament writings. And that can tell us quite a bit about the Old Testament canon available at that time. And here's the remarkable fact. We don't have a single instance, not even one instance, where Jesus or of the apostles or anyone in the New Testament that cites a book from the Apocrypha as scripture. Not even one instance. Now, that's remarkable because we have many, many Old Testament books cited as scripture. The Old Testament canon was really well known. Jesus appealed to it often in his debates with the Pharisees. But there's not seemed to be any indication in the first century that there was uncertainty about the canon. There was no awareness that we have in the books of the New Testament that there was a debate over the canon. If you think about it, Jesus disagreed with the Pharisees over many, many things, but he never disagreed with the Pharisees over which books belonged in the Old Testament. There was never a point where Jesus cited from a book and the Pharisees said, well, that book's not in our Bibles. From best we can tell, there was quite a bit of unanimity on the canon in the first century, and that unanimity did not include the books that we call the Apocrypha. So from what we can tell, the Apocrypha was added very, very late in the 16th century, and Protestants follow the Bible that was delivered and recognized by Jesus and the apostles.